Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from beautiful, sunny, and who's counting, but 38 days to Jazz Fest. And I am joined, as always, by Rocky Messing, who is gracing us with his presence in the United States, in Charm City still.
Still in Charm City, hanging out.
Right.
Loving
And
it.
we're really pleased today to be joined by someone I'm sure most, if not all of you know, Ralph Losey, who's been a mainstay of education and thought leadership in the eDiscovery space for longer than either one of us want to admit to, right? And Ralph's coming to us from his home in Florida. Ralph, great to see you. I haven't seen you in person or even this way for ages. I can't remember the last time I saw you, probably at Legal Tech New York like 3 years ago or something.
Probably longer than that. I think you came over to my house once too in Winter Park.
That's right. You had a beautiful barbecue at your house. That was a great evening. That was a wonderful evening.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And actually,
now I'm gonna be insulted that I wasn't invited.
Well, you know.
Come on down. Come on down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and actually, I have to correct one thing about my introduction. I am not at home.
Oh,
Much to my wife's relief, I am at my office.
so you're at the office. All right, we're going to get to that in a minute then. This is the
way we dress in my new law firm. This is how we dress in my office. We're very casual.
This is awesome.
Losey world, right? You're at, is it?
It is. I went with the only law firm in the world that already had my name on it.
It was convenient.
It was convenient. And, my son, he didn't have to interview me for very long, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall for that interview. And yeah.
And you want to work here? Why?
I'm sure we're asked.
Yeah,
So
really
let's back up. Let's back up a little bit.
Let's back up a little bit. Yeah. First, tell us how you got into the law. Tell us a little bit about your background. And then I'm really interested in how you got into eDiscovery specifically.
Okay, going back to the law. Well, I tried working for a living and I found out I wasn't that good at it. And actually, my first real job was working for my dad, George.
Oh, I think I remember this. Radio store?
Yeah, he had retired as a stockbroker and opened up a bookstore. And so my first job out of college, poor dad was paying for Vanderbilt and it was quite expensive. And he didn't realize that all my monthly expenses, there were a lot of books, and he'd never seen anybody spend so much money on books as I did. Books and record albums, but he didn't really know about that. But so when he saw, I said, hey, that might be a good thing to get into. So he started a bookstore, and I was actually on my honeymoon when he made the announcement. I was in San Francisco, as a matter of fact, and was going to be enrolled in a graduate program in San Francisco. And I'll bet you $100 you would never guess what that program is. But anyway, when I heard he was going to open a bookstore, I was so happy and thrilled for him. I said, Dad, can I please come back and help you run the bookstore? So I did, left San Francisco, or I'd probably still be there now. I mean, I did love it. We lived on Dolores Street, which was a pretty cool place.
Yeah.
And came back and worked in the bookstore and found out after I was there 2.5 years that I really didn't enjoy working with the public that much. And, I wasn't really, people would come in, I want that yellow covered book with Donahue was talking about it. And after a while, I knew exactly what they were talking about, but I had a great time.
It probably pained you to know what they were talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember.
And where was this?
This was where I live now, in Winter Park, Florida. It was the first bookstore in Winter Park, which is the home of Rollins College, which is the oldest private school in the Southeast, right up there with Sophie Newcomb and Tulane. And by the way, Tom, my grandmother went to Sophie Newcomb, going way back. So, education's always been important in my family. And so I tried to figure out what I wanted to do when I was at the bookstore, and actually considered some funny things like becoming a professional chef. I mean, would that have been a bad choice? And stuff like that. And then I took the LSAT. Everybody's talking about that. I think they're trying to muddy the waters with it. And I got some, for me, a very high score. And I said, hey, maybe I got some aptitude. So then the rest was history. And my father-in-law, another dad, was a lawyer, old-time lawyer from Miami. I mean, going back to the 40s. And so my memory of the law goes back to my father-in-law back in the days of early Miami. So I know about Florida, being a Florida lawyer, because that's been part of who I am and what my family's been about. And you know, we're very proud of the fact I got into the University of Florida. Actually applied to Harvard and Yale too, but didn't quite make it. But anyway, I got into the University of Florida, which to this day, and I'm not going to get all political on you, but to this day, you walk into the University of Florida, the main words that are inscribed was, I believe, by Chesterfield Smith, the former president of the American Bar Association, that said, "No man is above the law." And so that really, you know, when I went to law school, it was right after Watergate, and lawyers, you know, are not just sitting there like potted plants, but are being lawyers, and brought down the president, and I saw how justice worked, and I got excited about it. And that's where I went to law to kind of work in the justice profession. And I've always been proud of being a professional, not being a businessman. But to be honest with you, my dad, may he rest in peace, he was always a little disappointed that I went into law instead of business, because, you know, he thought lawyers are kind of a waste. You know, what do they bring to the table? But he got
what value
persuaded.
do they bring?
Yeah, you know, what are they producing? But I've enjoyed, you know, I think it was the right choice for me, and that's what I look for now when I'm going out interviewing people, hiring people. Is I ask them that question, you know, how did you get into the law? What are you into it about? And sadly, not as many people are into it for what I think is the right reason, which is to be a justice worker, to work about fairness and due process.
Yep.
And, you know, upholding the Constitution and telling the truth. So that's what the law has always been about for me.
So what kind of law did you start off practicing when you got out of school?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story on that, because I had one professor in law school that I really loved. His name was Professor Walter Weirach, and he was the first PhD from Yale to be teaching at the University of Florida, and actually was in law school in Germany at the time of Hitler, and lived through that, and then escaped and got to the US, where he ended up at Yale, and then ended up at the University of Florida. Anyway, won't go into the full details, but I understood his German accent, having gone to school in Vienna, Austria myself, and when I was at Vanderbilt for a year. And so I understood the German background, and I understood him. And, you know, he gave me what they call the book award in multiple subjects. That's when you get like the highest grade of something you brag about in law school. Nobody else knows what it is. But anyway, I got the book award in a new subject that was then being taught called legal counseling. And he was one of the first professors to be teaching it. And so because of that, when I got interviewed, and it was tough times, in 1979, it was a recession, it was hard to get a job, unlike now. Hard to get a job, and I got asked a counseling question by the interviewee, Mo Shams, who asked, you know, what would you tell a client? And I'm going, are you kidding me? This is just perfect for me. And so I had the best answer, and ended up being hired by Mo Shams, who was the first NYU tax lawyer in Orlando, and got hired to do tax and transactional work, which didn't work out, but I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, what I found out later, you know, fast forward like 30 years, my son's in the University of Florida, almost 30 years, 25 years, something like that. And he gets one of the last classes taught by Professor Weirach before he's retired. And the professor, 25 years later, is telling this story about one of his students. He didn't mention my name, but one of his students who got a job by taking the counseling thing. And then I found out about that. And then, of course, my son told him, hey, I'm that guy's son. And I hooked up again with Professor Weirach, and, you know, may he rest in peace. He passed away a few years after that, but he taught at Gainesville forever and helped me get hired, even though I probably shouldn't have been hired for that job, because, and we found out pretty quickly that you really needed to have more of a tax background to be backing up Mo Shams. But they liked me enough, and so I got switched over into litigation. But I've always had kind of, ever since, I've always primarily done litigation, but also had my hand in deals, had an opportunity to be involved in transactions. One of the biggest software companies to come out of Florida, I was like their in-house counsel for, outside in. I mean, I did everything for them. And, when the software was a brand new subject, and there was a day when I was, so at my law firm, I was the IT guy, and you're not gonna believe this, but I knew what every Microsoft file was in Microsoft DOS version until it got to Windows, when it exploded with 10,000 files. Nobody knew what they were.
Right.
But I would take the time every time there was a new release, see what files were new and click on them and figure out what they did. And so I did that for a few years, and was always, the computer nerd too, was part of the deal.
So you always had a fascination with technology, I guess, before going to law school. I mean, did you ever have a thought of actually a career in technology, or that just wasn't happening?
I tried to sell computer games in a hobbyist newsletter for a while. Nobody would buy them, but I did some coding. And I don't know if you can see back there, but there's a cricket back there, and it's a Moog poster. And my love for computers goes all the way back to Moog when I was at Vanderbilt, and they had a thing called Switched On Bach. Maybe Tom remembers that. It was very popular, made a lot of money. And so this guy in Nashville, where Vanderbilt is, did Switched On Nashville. And that also made him a lot of money. It was a popular thing. And so he bought one of the big Moogs, which, what Pink Floyd, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, all the greats for, the Beatles had, but they were $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. So most people didn't get their hands on them. But because he was a professor there, he opened it up, and anybody could sign up to use it. Nobody else at Vanderbilt was interested, or Peabody. So I was the only guy signing it up, but I got a chance to play with these giant, they were huge pieces, like, they weren't really computers, but it was technology in what I then loved, which was music. Tom and I share that passion. And so that love for music led me to the love of technology. And I started doing computer music, and you can see one of my old synthesizers back there, and my whole office is decorated with the kind of the old audio theme, because I was part of it always. I go way back to the very first, like I say, computer music things. And I wrote music programs on my Texas Instruments 99.4A. You remember that? And that was before the PC or any of the IBM stuff came out. So awesome. It goes way back. And I've watched,
right.
I tell people this, for my whole life, I've probably spent, and thank goodness I was a lawyer, could afford it, I could probably spend $1,000 every year in buying new computer stuff. And what I can buy now for $1,000, although probably $2,000. It's just unbelievable. But so I've watched it all. And that's kind of the unique perspective I bring to technology, as I was there, not so much as a vendor, but as what we used to call a power user. And I would read PC Magazine, and I'd come up with, create my own batch files and wow everybody, and, with simple stuff, But I remember when, Microsoft was just getting going, and I remember Steve Jobs, and, he became one of my heroes eventually, but, the Woz is really more of my hero. He's more of a down-to-earth guy. And I was, I was one of the original hackers in the positive sense. I would just fool around and make stuff. And I knew how to use a soldering iron. And my dad was an old, railroad, HO engineering model railroads. And that's how the MIT lab, the computer lab, developed out of the model railroad club at MIT. Yep. So that was the original kind of hacking thing. So I've always been the hands-on guy. I might not be that smart about figuring it all out, but I figure it out by trial and error and by just doing things. And that's been my approach to technology.
That's awesome. So you're working at a law firm down in Miami, or based in Miami.
No,
the firm.
My father-in-law was based in Miami. I'm based in Central Florida, in a beautiful little place called Winter Park. My office is in Orlando, but don't confuse the two for sure. We're very
they are very different. Yeah, but
nothing bad about Miami,
of course not.
But you know,
Right.
my hometown is Winter Park in Orlando.
Is Winter Park, so that's where you've been. Okay, so
Hey, quick interjection here. How
Yeah.
long did the bookstore go on?
Oh, it went on a long time. In fact, I'm kind of proud of this. It went out of business. He sold it and it became a new name, Park Avenue Books, but they honored his tradition. And he also started the first CD only record store. And that
Wow.
CD only record store still survives. And in fact, they were still using the accounting system that my father set up for them when he sold it to them in the mid 90s. They were still using it, old fashioned, but it worked. And the irony is it did a complete 180. At the time my father started, he was always cutting edge. It's kind of where I got some of this stuff. No, I'm not going to sell albums. Nope, just CDs when nobody had ever heard of that before. And now what they're doing is they don't sell CDs, they only sell a vinyl.
They go back to vinyl.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're doing great, by the way, even during COVID. I mean, so one of his stores still survives. The bookstore closed in like the late 90s, but they opened up a new version of it. And the woman was kind enough, she remembered my dad and my mother who helped them too. And she has their picture by the front, because in Winter Park, people remember that it was the first Winter Park bookstore. And so I come from, book royalty, if you will. I mean, I'm a book lover.
So I'm actually going to jump ahead one of our rapid fire questions that we normally save till the end, but I'm actually going to ask it now. What's your favorite book?
Oh boy.
I know, just one.
Yeah, now you didn't give me a warning on that one, just one. I'm always tend to be like some of the latest things that I've read always tend to be my latest favorites, but I'm really a sci-fi buff, and I'm trying to remember what the name of he wrote Numericon, and it was it's only about 20 years in the future. I'm trying to think of what the name of it is.
Oh, is that what's his name out of Seattle? He wrote 7 Eves also.
Yeah, he's like the top sci-fi writer. Like something Fall Back.
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. Well,
Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. I mean, so in fact, my son and I both love sci-fi. You go into his office and you'll see, instead of old audio, you'll see old video game stuff. But we share that love of science fiction, which I always have. I mean, going back to, I grew up on Heinlein and all the great Asimov, all of those things. That's how I learned to kind of think about the world. And that's why I'm always disappointed we're not further ahead, because I thought by now, Jesus, we'd all be flying to Mars and back every day. But so it's sci-fi and it changes.
Okay. Have you read The Three-Body Problem?
I have. And you know what? I enjoyed it because I like the Chinese perspective, but boy, are they pessimistic. I mean, you really think these advanced civilizations everywhere just wants to kill everybody? I mean, what about ethical evolution,
Right. No, it's definitely a very different perspective, and it's just not just the style of the writing, but also just like the thought process is different from a Chinese writer than an American writer. It's pretty amazing. So,
and I loved Harry Potter too, to tell you the truth. So even though my 6-year-old granddaughter has now read the second one and starting the third one, but her mom's warning her it's getting pretty scary. And it is scary.
It gets dark. Yeah.
So we're warning her, but so reading runs in the family, and I love to read almost as much as do computer stuff.
Right. Okay. So back to the law, because I mean I could talk sci-fi.
Yeah,
whatever.
But a whole other hour there. Yeah,
right, exactly.
Well, send me your phone number. I'm going to send you some of the cool ones. My brother, who's an oceanographer, turned me on. He's also a sci-fi lover. Turned me on to, and I can't even pronounce her name, but she writes sci-fi, and she's also she's an ichthyologist like my brothers. I mean, she knows all about fish. These people, she writes the best of aliens, descriptions of aliens, because if you study what's underneath us in the ocean, it is super
we don't know
bizarre,
what it is.
right? So she can create the most imaginative aliens if you're into that I've ever seen. Yeah.
I will definitely.
You're gonna go back to law again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know the boring stuff, but okay. So you're working. would you consider yourself to be working in big law at that point? I mean, was it a larger firm, smaller firm? Where were you actually employed?
No, I got hired by, I think I was the 11th attorney when I was hired out of law school. And funny thing is, when I just got rehired after, let's say, retiring from big law, I was the 12th law firm. So I've gone full circle.
Okay.
And but it's much more of a family law firm. You know, my son and daughter-in-law founded the firm. I guess it's been about 7, 8 years ago. And my son was in big law, so was my daughter. In fact, half the people here are, let's say, dropouts from big law. You know, they've been there, done that. So it's a real high quality. I mean, I will say that for big law, you specialize. I mean, there are really some great lawyers there. But it's the advantage of being in a small law firm where, you know, you can be yourself. And that's what I like about it. So I can have my keyboard and and I can talk about pretty much anything.
Right.
And believe me, my son is just as eccentric, only he's a lot smarter than I am. But yeah, I went from small, and then I always thought bigger was better. So we would merge up to larger firms, and then I got merged into Ackerman Centerfit, a firm founded in Orlando in 1920. And we have some of their former Ackerman Centerfit partners over here with us now, and I was a partner there, and I loved it. It was great. And then went from there to, about as big as you can get at Jackson Lewis.
Jackson, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point did the eDiscovery come into the mix?
Yeah, now that's a good question. Because I was always I was the IT guy literally at my first firm. I mean, going back to, I was the first attorney in town to have a computer on his desk.
Wow.
And probably the first attorney in town to be teased for having a keyboard on my desk.
Right. People
would come around and say, "Oh, you're a secretary, ha, ha, ha." And I make fun of some of these people now when I still see them. But, so went through all of that. I actually worked with System 36s of IBM and installed all of that myself, became good friends with the IBM repairmen that would come over when I couldn't figure it out. So I started, being the, chief technology officer of a small firm, and it got up to a medium-sized firm. We were about 25 by the time, I stopped doing that. It just got to be too much for me. And so technology is, and when I stopped having less of an emphasis on, like I mentioned, I got an opportunity to represent software people. At one point, I did a lot of trademark work, copyright work. I never did much patent work, but I later had a chance to get involved in patent litigation and things like that. And I don't know if you know this, Tom, but I once applied for a patent on a eDiscovery method. And part of the reason I did it, I used proportionality and built it into the legal method, because you can patent methods. And so I wanted to try and patent a legal method, which was pretty innovative. And I figured I couldn't lose, because if I got the patent, well, that would give me some kind of crazy, position. But if I didn't get the patent, at least I would prevent anyone else from patenting it, because I was patenting basically the idea of limiting the data you would review based on proportionality and using predictive coding. Mm-hmm. And this is way back to, when was that, like 2008 or 9. So I have had some patent work, but the technology has always been, Rocky's always been more like a tool for me as a lawyer, and I never left that. And so come 2005, my iWatch is so annoying, keeps dinging on me, but
technology.
My first exposure, to real big time eDiscovery was around just after the turn of the century as a defendant, when a plaintiff hit me with the preservation notice. And we had to, nobody had ever seen this. It was like around 2001, 2002, and I had to figure it out. And so by 2005, eDiscovery kind of took off. And I remember I saw a lecture with Ron Hedges, and I just had dinner with Ron just a couple of weeks ago up here, and seeing, hey, this is a real thing here. Maybe there's enough going on where I could start doing that and applying what I know outside of what I've been doing, which was just standard kind of litigation, using it as a tool.
And I'm sorry, what year was that?
This was 2005, 2006. And then in 2006, that's when I started the eDiscovery team blog. And I founded, with a friend of mine at Ackerman, we founded Ackerman's first eDiscovery department. And we, for all of their offices, they had several, and my old firm had merged into Ackerman. You know, it's like a big deal to me to be part of Ackerman, which was always top notch for Florida. And we brought their Washington, D.C. office, as a matter of fact. I won't go into that. But anyway, so at that point, 2006, I saw an opportunity to apply what I know and get out of doing the litigation, which I didn't have my heart in anymore. I was like defending insurance companies and health claim and disability and life insurance. I became pretty expert in that. In fact, I still have I have a life insurance agent, a license right now, although I don't represent any insurance companies. I did it just because I like to know about how life insurance
How it's
works.
working.
And my grandfather was a life insurance agent. I'm named after him. I'm Ralph Colby Losey, and he was Ralph Colby. So for the heck of it, it's kind of a dumb thing that I occasionally do. I studied up and took the license, and then COVID hit. But I had a background in insurance. Anyway, I was kind of sick of that. So that's when I started then dropping the rest of my practice and just only doing it around 2006. And by 2007, that's all I was doing. I don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. Because I mean, you were always one of the few attorneys out there who really actually understood the technology and would write about it. I mean, there were plenty of people from the technology standpoint who really got the technology, and there were a small handful of attorneys out there, you know, back in 2005 to 2010, especially as the technology was rapidly advancing at that point, and the new analytics and some of the, you know, predictive coding, like no one understood, you know, not just the legal side of it and proportionality and understanding the arguments that can be made around why this technology should be used or shouldn't be used or whatever it might be, but really getting into the guts and understanding what it was doing, which was pretty amazing at the time. Which is why, even though, yes, the blog posts tended to be rather lengthy, it was well worth reading. And you know, I know a lot of people who would go through them, people who were just from the technology side, because it was fascinating to see an attorney who really got it. So that was pretty impressive. But okay, so you're now focusing on eDiscovery. You're writing about it. You're helping the firm to actually further themselves in what they're doing on the eDiscovery side. What have you seen in terms of over the last 15 years that's really shifted, like in terms of from a big law, or let's not even focus on big law, from a lawyer perspective, when it comes to eDiscovery and technology? What's been the biggest shift that you've seen?
The biggest shift. Well, I mean, there's a lot of different answers you could give to that. I mean, like one of the things my son likes to say is, you know, why do you even call it eDiscovery? It's just discovery.
Discovery.
And there's some truth to that, but my reply to that is, well, what about depositions? And true, I mean, depositions today that doesn't go into the ESI or what they were doing with the evidence is a deposition that, you know, may want to talk to your carrier about, but you know, anyway, I mean, I see the point. And so like my son's generation, and he was like one of the first people to study eDiscovery in law school. He got to work with Bill Hamilton, I think, in the first year that Bill had the class, and I'm proud to say that Adam got the book award in eDiscovery. And you know, he had the advantage, not so much of being my son, but of being around computers his whole life and being a part of their blood. And that's what I see now that's changed. I mean, one of the things I like at being at Losey is that, you know, you open my door and there's three people, the 20 somethings, you know, and it's just like part of their blood. I mean, that's how they grew up with it. I remember what it was like. Ken Withers used to talk about this, how we were the proto-digital. He tried to make that a popular word. I don't know if it ever worked or not, but you know, the first generation, you know, that would be me and Tom, and maybe you, Rocky. I don't know how old you are. You look pretty young, but you know, one of the early generations to be digital. Yep. But we had our minds in both worlds. We were also in the paper world, and I still print out paper every now and then, and so, we're the divide to bring the paper into the digital. And now the next generation, I mean, my son, I think he has a printer and is like never uses it. And it's more of a digital orientation, and they're fed up with Facebook for reasons different than me. It used to be the college thing that they were all cool about and doing it. Now it's like the grandmothers everywhere. But the digital revolution is, I think has changed the psyche of the lawyer. And I used to study that. I used to like to study the psychology of the lawyer, and that Professor Weirach I mentioned wrote an important book years ago in the 70s on the psychology of lawyers. And so I think that has changed. The mindset has changed, where people, I don't have to convince them that eDiscovery is here to stay. I mean, I used to have to write blog articles like that, right? That's not necessary anymore. So maybe the basic attitude, but I mean, I will tell you, the educational challenge is still there, which is what you guys are doing is still so important. There's still, there's so few law schools where it's really taught. I mean, even Georgetown, great law school, they have great programs. I think they used to only teach 3 hours a year. I mean, to me, it is such, in the real world of legal practice and litigation, it's all discovery. I mean, sure, you prepare for trial, but there's so few trials that happen. It's less than 2% on the federal level. And so, you need to study things for sure, like mediation and stuff, but also discovery. And discovery is still critical.
It's essential.
Yeah, I mean, and in my opinion, and this is what I've always preached, you've read my writings, the truth matters. You got to get at the evidence. What do the facts say? And you don't fight over, you narrow it down. And the best trial lawyers all get this. You don't fight over discovery. It is what it is. You're dealt the cards that you have. You can't change the cards. You can argue what they mean, say, hey, this is a royal flush, it beats that or whatever, but the cards are, the facts are the facts. And that's the way the discovery system was built and designed when they came up with the rules of procedure right after World War II. But it was a more collegial attitude then, and people would cooperate, and it's a cooperative system. And the judge, is just supposed to sit back and let the lawyers work it all out.
Right.
But unlike the rest of the world, where the judges are much more active. To see the change, because I saw the height of adversarial starting in the 80s. Everything was very, very, and it's still gotten worse. But we've made some progress to bring it back to a more cooperative system. I mean, Richard Brahman, may rest in peace, with the Cooperation Proclamation. Maybe not the best name for it, but I mean, the whole idea.
It is what it is. Yeah.
The whole idea of working together is really going back to the roots. I mean, it's going back to Abe Lincoln's day, when lawyers were brothers and sisters. Well, there weren't many women lawyers back then, but everybody was collegial.
So Ralph, I will say, hold on, wait. This is important.
No, it is.
We know. Okay, fine. I'm leaving. We know that we're talking to an attorney because I believe I just heard Ralph say that he can argue on what a royal flush means in poker. So, which I'm going to be impressed when you're able to
you can argue about anything.
Get your way through that one in the casino.
Argue about anything, of course.
Right.
Well, what I'm interested in, though, is you mentioned the challenge for education. What do we have to do to change law schools' minds about this subject? You said the young bloods have come up, and it's part of their background. My son's the same way. He's working for Joy Morrow now, and she's like, great, I didn't have to explain anything to him. He just dove right in. And, I didn't have to tell him what a database was. He got it. But certainly nobody who's running a law school, with few exceptions, Bill aside and a couple of other people, what do we need? Is it just until those people get in charge of law schools, we have to wait another generation to get that change?
Well, and I've written at length about this. I've thought about it a lot, not recently, but there used to be a prejudice against discovery as intellectually unchallenging and inferior. And law professors wouldn't waste their time over something really so basic as discovery. It's like, give me a break. You guys don't really understand the real world, and they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, bless their hearts. Many of these law professors don't really practice. They go to Harvard, they go to Yale. and they get taught certain things. Let's talk about the Constitution, all these super complicated things. But I'm telling you, eDiscovery also gets super complicated. And the vast majority of people that graduate from law school are not going on to become Supreme Court justices. It's not a grooming ground for big law. Like, I heard this thing, I wrote a tweet, I still active in Twitter, but kind of bugged me that law.com was promoting its review of law schools as what are the best law schools to go to get into big law. And I replied back, how about what are the best law schools to go to get a decent legal education?
How about the 75% of the attorneys in the country who work in a law firm of 10 or less?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Come on. So, what's it take for the law professors to get real and the deans to get real? I've been fighting that battle a long time. I think we won it down here in Florida to a certain degree because Bill is so stubborn. I mean, he doesn't give up and he got it. But, the rest of the country, they're still so money driven. But I never got in the law to be a money grubber. And that's why I'm unpopular among the 20 somethings that want to revolutionize the law to make it more business-like. I'm going, you do not want to be more business-like. You want to be more professional. You want to be a cut above. And, it's not about money. That's what separates law as law from business. I mean, true, they have to work together, but business comes to find out what is the right thing to do because they don't know. And so the lawyers can't say, well, here's how to get away with doing the wrong thing. The lawyers traditionally have been the moral pillars to make sure that society cooperates and gets along. And I blame the law schools and lawyers a lot for the fact that our society has deteriorated and become so polarized as there's not enough people above.
So it still doesn't answer, but it still doesn't answer the question of what can our generation do to actually shift that? Well, it's a hard question.
I mean, the one specific thing I've got for you is when the law firm are going to hire people, ask them and get the word out. What do you know about technology? What do you know about it? And make that a value proposition for them getting a job. I mean, I know plenty of big law firms. They've never even thought of asking somebody what their technology proficiency was. It's just not part of their mindset.
Right.
Make it part of the screening process. That's what we do here in my current firm. If you don't understand technology, you don't get hired.
We've got a duty of technical. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, to that point, many states now have a duty of technical competence. It's not far-fetched to ask that question. Yeah.
Right. But are you required to be on TikTok at least 2 or 3 times a day? So,
I don't like TikTok. I actually have an account and checked it out. And aside from the fact that it's run by a Chinese company, which makes me a little suspicious, to be honest with you. Nothing about China. I'm a student of China, but no, I do Twitter. And
wait a minute. Yeah. You studied for a year in Austria. You were a student in China. Did you really go to school in this country?
No,
I was never a student in China, but you know what? The graduate program I was enrolled in San Francisco, I said you'd never guess.
What was it?
I was going to study and get a master's and then go on in Chinese philosophy.
That's funny.
I do know a fair amount about the ancient Chinese thinking and, Taoism, Confucianism, great thoughts, great thinkers, advanced culture. Not such a big fan of totalitarians in whatever country they're in.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny. When I was at Hopkins, I wanted to be in what's called the SICE, the School of Advanced International Studies. Yeah, it's a 5-year program ends up with a master's degree, and start in Baltimore and then end up at a campus down in DC. And basically they feed you into the foreign service is what it is. But I was interested in the Far East. I was interested in either Japan or China. And they had no feeder for that. It was all, South America or Europe. That was it. And the small fact that I had absolutely no aptitude for a foreign language entered into the equation.
Minor detail. Minor detail. Whatever. Okay, so you're now working at Losey, and what's your day look like? Like, what are you actually focused on now?
Well, one thing that's interesting is that I don't sit down, and it's kind of my other hobby is health. I'm 70, and one of my goals is, I don't know if you can see it back here. My goal is to be a kick-ass 100. And so, part of my exercise program is I don't sit, I'm standing right now. And, I will exercise and do what I want. So I'll start off in the morning, mostly I'll front end my exercise at home. I walk every day, sunrise, sunset, and I get to work maybe 9:30. And, here I'm at my desk doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, the variety I love, because the one thing about being an eDiscovery specialist in a big firm is what you do is eDiscovery, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And I actually took a deposition, which I hadn't done in over 12 years. I took a deposition a couple weeks ago.
And how was
I was
it?
a little afraid of it because,
Yeah.
not because, I'm taking hundreds of depositions, but I'd never done one on Zoom. And here I was, having to control all of that. And I was, like 6 inches away from this poor woman opponent. So I asked her questions for 6 hours, and
Wow.
there her face is, like right there. And so there was a lot of new things. But it's like riding a bicycle, and I enjoyed it. So I enjoyed the variety. Read complex documents every now and then. That's, to me, is kind of like mind-numbing relaxation. You just sit there, because I read pretty fast, just read stuff and look for things. So the variety that I get to do is fascinating. And lately I've spent a lot of time interviewing law students, recent graduates. Some fascinating people out there, people from all over the world. That we recently hired one who was from India and just got her master's degree at Penn State. And there's just some, if you're broad, and we look for diversity, because one thing we've learned, and I've kind of learned it the hard way, being an old white guy from Florida, is the value of diversity and overcoming your unconscious biases. And also, this is a firm that doesn't suffer from ageism. I'm afraid their ageism is alive and well in many technology, particularly companies, and just in the law in general. I hope to practice another 20 years. I'm 70. And I think that won't be that unusual
There is not
in the future.
Yep,
So
exactly.
I like the diversity of doing different things and just interacting with different people, different generations. And, like I say, I actually like going back into the office. And again, Tom, Molly, my wife, she loves that.
Right.
How is Molly, by the way?
so-
Doing well?
It's got the cold now. It's like, when you're not wearing masks as much, you get colds. I've never been so healthy because we're not around people before. So.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so I've got 2 quick questions for you, and then Tom will wrap this up with 2 more questions. My first question is Chicago or New York style pizza?
Ooh. Well, I'm kind of a New Yorker, really. I like the thick crust, the thick Chicago as well. That's all my granddaughter seems to live on is pizza. So
It's like, pizza.
But
And the problem is,
I really like New Jersey pizza, to tell you the truth.
oh, there you go. A new category.
Jersey pizza.
New York,
Right.
Chicago, or Jersey?
Yeah, it's kind of a derivation in New York, but
if you're in New York, if you're from New York, then New Jersey is basically next door to Chicago. So, it's over the river. So
Yeah.
But okay. Star Wars, Star Trek, or I'm not that big of a geek, but I think you might be. So
are you kidding me? One of my a good friend, it was my son's friend. Everybody called him the Admiral because he actually knew every fact there was to know about Star Trek.
Nice.
And I grew up watching Star Trek with my dad back in the 60s, and what a tremendous eye opener and liberal force it was. But I also remember waiting in line for 2 hours to see the first Star Wars. And, I love Star Wars. The latest Star Wars, it kind of lost a little bit of interest, but now I'm back to loving Yoda. I always loved Yoda.
Lost it a little.
Oh, well, the Mandalorian. You got to love the Mandalorian, right?
Mandalorian's
Baby
awesome.
Yoda.
Yep.
If I was in my garage apartment, I could take out my lightsaber. And I've actually taken lessons on how to do the lightsaber. I can do some cool stuff.
Oh,
So you could call me, either side. I love them both. I hate
all right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. So last rapid fire question: Beatles or Stones?
Oh, well, I'm looking at right now, you can't see it, but Abbey Road clock. So I'm definitely Beatles. Although when I was in college, I probably would have said the Stones. But I don't remember much of that. So
I hear you.
So Tom,
So our
I
last
believe that
question-
makes the score. Tom, I believe that makes the score something like 40 something to 2.
There are only like 3 of us
Stones?
like-minded people who.
which one were
who-
you, Tom?
I'm sorry. Oh, Stones. Come on,
You were
greatest
Stones?
rock and roll band in the world, please.
So, I mean, I love
Yep.
Paint It Black, and and
Yeah.
I've admired how those old guys stay so active. I mean, Mick
Oh,
Jagger,
yeah.
he's incredible.
Yeah, Jagger's an inspiration. God, I just saw him doing
And we're on
Go
this
ahead.
show. We're fans of both, but
Yeah.
there's one over the other.
But,
So.
yeah.
but the Stones clearly rule. So that's all. That's all we have to say about it.
Whatever. Uh-huh.
Now you're gonna hit me with
I'll go
a
with the
surprise
popular
question
opinion.
that I already know what it is.
Now is the last question that we always let people ruminate on. So ruminate on. If you could spend a day with anybody from our profession, living or dead, who would it be and what would you do?
Okay, well, and this may surprise you, but I'm a big fan and read and so much about Abraham Lincoln that I would love to spend time with Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he used to be the technology lawyer of his day. I've written about this. It's one of my favorite blogs, was to talk about his patent that he wrote, and he would go around giving lectures, much like all of us do now, about the latest advanced technologies, things like the telegraph and the railroads.
The railroads, yeah.
And he started the Air Force. I mean, he was very advanced, and he used to make fun of the old lawyers. He used to use the word old fogies. And and he, much like Zelensky of today, just rose to the occasion and just became a legend, a great man. We'd all like to think we have that capacity. I know I don't think I have it, but he did it, and he became a lawyer that became a true leader of our country. So
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. Yeah, he would be fascinating to talk with, right? Speaking of that, quick question. This is totally off the cuff, and
we already had the last question. That's it,
wait.
Tom. You're okay. Fine.
Well,
Break
this
this
is
up.
the
such
last
thing unless
question.
you're the judge. And then
yeah,
then I
that's right.
shut up.
Hey, I control this microphone, Mr. Speaker. I paid for this microphone. You ever going to write again, Ralph? We going to see any blogs ever, even a couple times a year?
He did blog. He blogged
somebody
like
hasn't
a month
been
ago.
reading my blog. No,
I know.
I'm
You started up again?
And thank you for asking it, though. It gives me a chance.
Yeah, give me a plug. Give us all a plug.
Well, so I'm applying to be an arbitrator and also a special master. And I'm going to write an article soon about my take on special mastery and how it's more than just being a judge, but incorporates mediation and settlement resolution and just kind of, so I've been thinking a lot about, what can an old eDiscovery lawyer do? I mean, most of them become special masters, right? And there's some great ones out there, particularly the judges. I mean, I hear Judge Francis is knocking it out of the roof, Judge Peck, and then, there's ones that have been doing it forever, like Craig Ball and Mora, and there's a lot.
Craig's not a judge. Craig's not an ex-judge. He just thinks he is.
No.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm in different categories.
Yeah.
So I hope to have, provide.
Sorry, Craig, I couldn't resist.
To it. I'm more the hands-on category, like, Rocky, you were nice enough to point out.
Is it under the old blog name?
Yeah, no, eDiscovery team. And, so I'm going to be offering my services on that. And I'm going to kind of announce that and just kind of give you my take on it. And
well, so for anybody who didn't ever see that and has been asleep for the last 10 years, the eDiscovery team is Ralph's blog.
E-Discovery team.
Yes.
I couldn't get it without a hyphen. It was not my choice.
Yes. And
highly
recommend
it. The other thing is that I'm writing about, and I'll be talking about it more soon. I talked about it in my other prior blog where I came out of the closet and I revealed for the first time that I do go both ways. And by that, I mean both plaintiff and defendant. So I have done plaintiff's work.
That was a great article.
This was something I had to kind of keep under wraps because my other firm, great firm, but, we were mainly doing defense work.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
truth is, my greatest victory was as a plaintiff's lawyer in the field of whistleblower, key tam.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going back
Great.
to that. And the first thing I do when I approach a new area marketing wise is, of course, like any geek, what is the right domain name, right? So I finally came up with fraud is bad. So I've got fraudisbad.com.
I like it. Fraud is bad.
Like simple stuff. So I'm looking for the people that know about the pandemic, people taking the Paycheck Protection Program and buying Lamborghinis, like the guy in Miami got caught.
Mhm.
Another guy bought a Pokemon card for $70,000 instead of, this is the biggest $3 trillion. I can't even get my head around it, in money that's the federal government has printed up and is giving out to people as we speak related to pandemic. And I'm not saying, I'm not saying they shouldn't have. The fact is they did it. Trump started and now Biden is continuing it. And it's just the biggest federal giveaway in history. And of that 3 trillion, probably 10 to 20% of that is not going to where it should be. And the government doesn't have enough people to catch it all, even though they're hiring DOJ lawyers right and left. It needs whistleblowers. That means the American public that knows about something. Maybe they work for a company and they know that they're cheating. And so that's where I come back to the why to go to law school, justice and everything. I want to do justice and get these fraudsters that are cheating American taxpayers. And in the process, hey, in key tam and in False Claims Act, you get a bounty. You can get 10 to 20% of that money. And I've done it before and it's nice. So, can do good and get paid for it. So that's my 2 new things is to
there you go.
False Claims Act and then also special master and hopefully arbitrator soon.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Well, Ralph, really a great pleasure talking to you and seeing you again. And glad things are going well at the Losey firm. And that they're accepting you and you seem to be. Do you have a performance review coming up in the near future?
I know by my 6-year-old granddaughter. No, I brought her in here last weekend. I've already started the indoctrination for the next generation. Scribbling stuff. No, you got to start them young.
There you go. You get your own little clerk. Yeah.
No. So I'm proud of being able to create some great lawyers, and my son and daughter-in-law are that. So I'm very proud to be here.
Good deal. Good deal. Awesome. Well, again, great to see you. Great to talk to you, hear from you, and hopefully, if this year continues to improve, we'll be able to see you someplace in person.
No,
my fingers
come on
crossed.
down.
Yeah.
Rocky, you didn't get to see the house, but I'm in a new house now, Tom. So come on down when you're in town. And
we'll make a field trip.
Drink a little wine and look at the lake.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
great talking to you guys. I got dressed up for the occasion.
Yeah, thanks. We appreciate it. As did we. Yeah.
So,
that's just the way of the world.
All right.
I am wearing pants, so I want to let you know.
All right. There you go. Well, thanks, Ralph. Thanks to all of our listeners, and we'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.
Bye, y'all.